Just by way of introduction, my name is Jason Watt. I'm one of the full-time instructors at Business Career College. I carry both the Chartered Life Underwriter and Registered Health Underwriter designations. So over the next hour or so, we're going to be looking at 6 major topics with respect to benefits plans. Now really we're looking at insurance here. We're not going to spend any meaningful amount of time in this presentation talking about group retirement, which I'm well aware is also a portion of group benefits. We're really looking though at insurance and insurance type of arrangements. So we're going to look at just a brief history of group benefits. We're going to look at the parties who are involved in group benefits and some legal ramifications that each of those parties may have to deal with. We're going to look at how we structure a plan as far as who the members are going to be and how we identify those members, how they're going to access benefits. We're going to look at some legal concepts around group benefits. So we have to understand some of the law around group benefits. This is something that I think is often not well understood and not well presented with respect to group benefits. But really, if you understand this will help you to see how benefits can be structured to best benefit both the employee and employer. We're going to look at some tax concepts. Don't want to get too much down in the weeds with respect to taxation. You will see that there's some opportunity there for some confusion, some difficulty sometimes with respect to the taxation of group benefits. And finally, we're going to look at the typical structure of a group benefits plan. That is, what does the life insurance portion look like? What does the disability insurance portion look like? What does the drug coverage look like? And so forth. So before we get into the nitty-gritty part of the presentation, I think it's important to have a look at why we even have group benefits plans. What's the purpose of a group benefits plan? And I'd like to first look at it from the employer's perspective. So from the employer's perspective, the first and probably most obvious reason for putting in place a benefits plan is that ability to attract and retain employees, especially in a competitive employment situation, as we have in a good chunk of Canada today. Employers want to go out and find the best talent, and once they find that talent, they want to hang on to it. In response to that, they will look to put in place the most competitive benefits packages available. Now, that being said, employers typically don't want to overreach too much. They don't want to spend money unnecessarily either, so they have to understand very well what benefits options are available for their employees. Kind of where can I find that ideal mix, that cost versus benefit, that will allow me to keep my employees happy without necessarily spending too much. Group benefits provide a very tax-efficient mechanism for providing a benefit to employees. Most group benefits end up tax-free in one sense or another. Disability insurance is a notable exception there, but we have the opportunity now to provide a tax-free benefit to our employees. The rules in Quebec are quite a bit different. I would encourage you that if you are doing business in Quebec, that you are familiar with those rules separately, that really this presentation is designed to cover off the rules in the 10 common law provinces the 9 common law provinces and 3 territories. Some employers are going to put benefits in place just because it provides a level of goodwill towards their employees. You have maybe a small business where the boss walks by the same staff every day and thinks, I feel awful if something actually happened to these people. I want to make sure that they're going to be looked after if one of them becomes sick or one of them needs some medical coverage or whatever it happens to be. And hand in hand with that, this is often the only coverage that people have in place, given that the limits are typically fairly small, especially with respect to life insurance as compared to other sorts of plans. This is not necessarily a good thing, but generally better to have some coverage than nothing at all. So at least by putting this coverage in place, we have something to take care of our employees. And liability is sometimes an issue. By putting in place a group benefits plan, the employer may be able to remove some risk of liability with respect to how their employees are dealt with, especially in the period of a disability. As much as there are good and convincing reasons for the employer to put benefits As much as there are good and convincing reasons for the employer to put benefits in place, there are also reasons why an agent, why somebody in your shoes might want to understand and possibly even implement the group benefits business into your own practice. So the most obvious one, I think, is that it allows for so many people to get coverage at the same time. And this means that even if you're not in the group benefits business, it would be virtually impossible to operate a business in this industry without running into people who have group benefits coverage. This is where most people would provide the cornerstone for their insurance coverage. It's often where you'll find disability insurance. We'll find usually small amounts of life insurance here. We can find critical illness insurance, extended health care and dental insurance, really forms of any of the coverage that you might sell on an individual basis. So just understanding the basics of how those group benefit structures work is quite important. An attractive feature of group benefits from a business management perspective is how the compensation is structured. That most products sold on an individual basis have a heaped type of commission structure where there's a big payday at the beginning and that payday levels off over time. But when you get into group benefits, you'll find that the compensation is actually a little bit lower per dollar of premium at the outset, but then that compensation typically stays consistent throughout the life of their group. So if you have some groups, if you have a few groups that are loyal to you, that stay with you, that provides a nice little annuity in helping to run your business. Of course, you have to earn that loyalty. You have to serve that group well and make sure that they come back year after year to do business with you again. This is quite a competitive market, and we will see that there are a variety of structures available out there that you may not be aware of. So if you're not doing a good job taking care of your groups, somebody else might be. And finally, and this is really an old school way of looking at it, this is something that's taught less and less today, but there was certainly a time when, as an agent coming into this business, you were taught, go out and get 3 or 4 or 5 groups. If you have, say, 4 groups of 15 lives each, that's 60 employees. You're going to have an obligation then to go sit down with those 60 employees and describe to them the structure of their benefits and ask them about their retirement savings and talk to them about what kind of coverage their spouse has and insurance for their kids and so forth. So you can really mine this block of business to provide a meaningful part of your, or a meaningful addition to your existing practice. And like I say, that used to be very common. It's not taught so much today, but it still is an important part of a business if you want to treat it as such. And when you look at that, if you have 4 groups of 15 lives each, that's 60 employees, you're probably going to see 10 to 15% turnover in those 4 groups every year. That's another roughly 6 to 10 employees you're going to have the chance to sit down with on a regular basis. So group benefits have a fairly short history compared to other sorts of products. The first plan implemented, the first group benefits plan implemented, was implemented in the United States in 1910. The retailer Montgomery Ward was the employer in question, had about 2,000 lives on that original plan. And it was really seen to be somewhat controversial when it was first done. There's some significant anti-selection concerns. with group benefits. We'll actually talk about that in a few minutes here. And that was even a concern back in 1910, that really we were taking on this group without any kind of underwriting, and it was seen to be even a little bit anti-competitive. Smaller insurers, niche insurers, thought that they were going to really suffer for the introduction of group benefits because the big insurers that typically took these on originally were big enough that they could absorb the risk associated with taking on a group with no individual underwriting or very little individual underwriting. In Canada, there was some initial controversy about whether it was even possible under our then in place insurance legislation to enter into group benefits contracts. But in 1919, after some changes to insurance legislation, Sun Life became the first Canadian insurer to offer benefits plans. We have seen a fair bit of change in group benefits. If you look to the post-World War II era, for example, that's when really health and dental coverage becomes such a major component of group benefits plans. Up until that time, it wasn't as common for individuals to seek that health and dental coverage. And in recent years, about the last decade, maybe 15 years or so, we've seen a push towards more self-insured models. That is, where groups that are seeking cost efficiencies have found other ways to fund their group benefits. This is where we see models like an administrative services only model, or we get into health spending accounts or healthcare spending accounts. We get into health and welfare trust. These are all examples of these self-insurance models. We're going to deal with those in a separate presentation. We're not going to deal with those in detail here.